All right, I think we'll get started here. Once again, thanks to everybody who's on. I know we do have a few people that are requesting a recording of this video as they're prepping for a storm, or a couple of them just couldn't make it. So anyway, we will be recording this. I do have the chat box open in front of me here. So if you have any questions, I would encourage you to put them up in the chat. Purpose of this meeting today, we're just going to give you some follow-ups on where we are on some key factors in this, as well as kind of there will be an agronomic piece at the end. We'll let Mark Lubers with Westbred's going to kind of go through I guess a slide would be the best description of it, of production practices and what to think through. And we'll also have that available in PDF that we can send out to everybody, just kind of as a here's the thought process piece for it. So anyway, we'll cover a little bit of the market. We'll cover a little bit of everything else that's going on. So anyway, please put any chats in that you need to, ask any questions, and we'll keep rolling here. So anyway, once again, thanks for being on. Name's Andrew Holscher. Here's kind of our outline. I'll update you on the program. We're going to spend a little bit of time directly on the insurance piece of it. We will also directly talk about FSA reporting and how that will work. There's going to be some very tangible steps forward that we need to cover. And immediately following that, we're going to go over the production outline that Westbred has put together so that you guys can start putting a thought process around those practices. There will be a couple of questions that we've been asked that I'll directly address as we go through this. So moving on, in terms of economics, no real change in the economics, no change in the pricing structure, everything as it is. So we're looking at the Kansas City low side 14 basis with a production premium added onto it, depending upon how your quality of your wheat does. There's other delivery destinations that we will be working through, including Wichita. And then as we get a little bit further out west, we have some rail relationships that we're looking to build on as well. But at the moment, no change in economics. Everything continue to run under that assumption. I'm going to mention again, make sure that we understand that what we're doing is something that is risky. It is not something to bet your farm on. We think there's market potential here, and we're going to pursue it. I mean, there's good economics. There's good rotational advantages to these type of things. And so just understand the risk, but there's also a reward with it. So in speaking to the HRW and HRS trends, one thing that you will notice if we were to put our spread together between the HRW and the HRS, is that spread is actually weakened a little bit, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but certified seed for these guys at Westbred and even talking to a few others, seed is getting pretty short. So as we look at the acreage issue that's going on in the HRW, where we might be the lowest acres in 100 years, you know, the eastern half of Kansas had a pretty hard time getting the wheat crop in that they wanted to. Anything that was following soybeans is an iffy stand at best right now to unemerged. I heard stories of a guy in south central Kansas who was planting wheat the day before Christmas. So as with this, you know, just a normal market assumption here is that if we see lots of acres up north in the springs, and we see lower acres in the HRW territory, we would expect that there's a possibility of the HRW to HRS spreads collapsing, or I don't know about going inverse, but what you're looking at is that HRW is going to be a little bit harder to find possibly on the market. So with that said, understand that even if the even if the spread between the HRW and the HRS goes inverted or goes flat, you're still going to be receiving the low side 14 pro basis at Kansas City, and you're still going to be receiving that premium that's going to incentivize us to make sure we continually produce a quality product. So looking at it, once again, just keep your eye on this. If a ton of acres go in up north, the spread might be something that you need to watch to make sure you can capture some of it as we move forward. One of the questions that was raised that we'll address is the question was, do you think that an HRS will take the place of an HRW, or can we just produce a better quality HRW? To be honest with you, if we produced a better quality HRW, HRS would not have any place in a lot of freight markets because, especially the southern half of the U.S., there's just freight advantages involved there. The problem is we're not producing that as an HRW. The other side of that is, as corn and soybeans continue to creep from east to west, if you're wanting a cereal crop for a rotational purpose, the HRS has application in irrigation settings because of its ability to not have to maintain water to get a stand establishment in the fall. You can roll over that water usage into the spring. The other thing is you can plant longer season corn, you can plant longer season beans because you don't have to worry about stand establishment in the HRW. So will HRS replace HRW? Probably not. If we produce a really, really high quality HRW, does the spread between HRS and HRW decrease? Probably. It just doesn't have as much application into a mill. But there's other economics of this that we need to take into account with rotation and cropping practices and those type of things. I will also say that as we're venturing into this, we're chasing a market that's out there and a market that can be developed and has good economics backing it. But also there's unintended consequences of everything we do in a market. We're trying to compensate for as many of those as we can. But this could have implications on other things that we don't think about. So I would just encourage you guys, as you look at this, to make sure that on your operation, you think through your economics. Does the cost structure of it work? Is the risk that you're going to have to put into the crop, does that make sense to you? And also, what's the unintended consequences of it? Are you, if we're in crazy drought conditions and it doesn't look good, are you willing to hay this? Do you have a market to possibly look at that? Just think through these and make sure that you're not putting yourself in too much jeopardy. But we do think that there is clearly a market, there's clearly a play here, and we've had some good success with it. As we look at, once again, I'm just going to go over the Right Fit Farm. I know there's a few new guys on here that want to welcome you guys, and I can send you any YouTube links that you need for what we've done thus far. But I would encourage you guys, number one on this list, again, is once again, kindness. We don't know everything. We are trying to hedge everything that we can. We're trying to make sure that the small things are taken care of. But kindness is always a wonderful thing in a relationship. Be innovative. We want to learn. We want variability in production practices. We want an understanding of what makes it good and what makes it bad. So be innovative. On-farm storage or access to storage, this is a piece that we are working through with farmers, and I'll mention this kind of going forward, but once you produce this grain, we need to know what the sales strategy is for your grain on your farm, almost as it goes into the ground. Are you wanting it moved before fall harvest? Are you wanting to hang on to it through fall harvest? Is it you're not producing enough to carry, you just want to sell it when the price is right for it? All of those things we're going to need to figure out, but on-farm storage gives us some flexibility to elongate that supply chain. There are some people that are working with us with some unique possibilities to get this on rail and those type of conversations that getting access to their storage will be a timing component as well. The financial security, this just speaks to the fact that you're not betting the farm on this. This is a risky proposition. This is something that is not germane to the area currently. So don't view this as something that's going to save your farm. We want it viewed as innovation. And an understanding of grain movement. Perfect example of that is actually what we're going through right now and what looks like next week is if you're running a truck book right now and you're doing farm deliveries, well, the roads are awfully soft and pretty nasty. They're going to freeze up over the weekend, it looks like, but I don't think many people are going to want to load trucks and blowing snow and 40-mile-an-hour winds. So there's just logistics that are, sometimes tough to accommodate. So just an understanding of that as well. As we look here, a couple of things for you. I'm going to do the reporting side of this first. So we have worked it out with the FSA that when we figure out where your acres are going in, and we're going to keep track of that so that we actually know exactly what type of product we're producing. We don't want to end up producing just another blanket commodity, but we will actually have an FSA fact sheet and instructions delivered to your reporting agency on behalf of you, that when you come in, they will actually understand and have instructions from the state offices of what they're supposed to do to make sure everything reporting is done well. You'll also receive a copy of this, but the state office has worked with us to get that taken care of. Insurance-wise, we're working with a weather insurance company to be able to bring a program to you guys that will be a combination of a freeze and heat contract. So heat, obviously, during the filling period, freeze during the early growth. At this point, it looks like you'll be able to opt in or opt out on either one of those if you have interest. The cost of production side of it, this one is actually getting a little bit tough for me. What we will see, one of the cost of production groups that we talked with, they want to see people's tax returns before they would be willing to do any cost of production to solidify that this person's a good producer. For marginal acres, most of our guys are not planting significant enough acres to take the time and also to expose their financials and stuff like that. So we are pursuing a couple other venues. The ideal situation would be where a farmer can sit there and say, I want $150 of cost of production insurance against a guaranteed revenue component. So essentially we're covering your cost, not your margin. And then that would be, that would go through an actuary, and it would then have a insurance premium assigned to it. So those conversations are going, but in the one that we thought was probably the best look right now, we hit the snag of them wanting proof of financials. Somebody ask a question? Okay. The other thing is that the FSA office, and this was done once again right before the shutdown, they have a program called NAP, and that program they think would qualify for this. And we had started discussions down the road to get approval on it and to start getting numbers put together to be able to bring. And well, they haven't been in the office for a while here. So as soon as they get back, that conversation will pick up and we'll be able to move forward with it. I can't speak to timing on that right now, but that program is out there that we are working with. The freeze and heat, I would hope to have quotes back here by the end of this week that we could get those out to you guys for you to look over. Last thing I'm going to put up here is the steps forward. We need to get acres and we need to get seed ordered here as quick as possible. Seed is running out. Westbred's been kind to us on their varieties that they are withholding some up in the Northern Territory to move into this area. We need to be making decisions. And I think the decision, if Andrew had a choice, the decision would have been to have that seed ordered last week. When you do that, let us know where and the acreage. This gives us an estimate of about how many bushels you think you're going to have. It also gives us the ability to contact the FSA department and have those conversations for you to make this transition easy and your reporting. But it also gives us that ability on number 3 to figure out, okay, making sure our freight lanes are figured out properly, making sure that the delivery of your grain matches up to when you actually need it to be sold and moved. If there's anything else special in that, it's really easy for us to plan 6 months in advance It's awfully difficult with a 2-week window to try to figure out how to ship grain into a place that doesn't necessarily want to take it at the moment. So let us know when and where, or let us know where you're going to be at. Let us know your possible acreage. We don't want to get nosy in your business at the moment, but we do want to make sure that we plan this out well. And let us know when you need to have that grain sale timed up to match it. If there's any questions, we anticipate, having talked with Mark and a few other guys, we anticipate multiple conversations like what we're having now as we move forward. It might be that nobody else is on because you guys are busy, but we'll get a YouTube recorded with the questions that we have, and we'll get it posted out and send the link. You guys can watch it at your convenience. So ask any questions, please. There might be things we're forgetting to cover, things we're just making an assumption about. I would really like for you guys to send as many questions as you can and all that. So I'm going to throw up my contact information here for you. This will once again be in the YouTube if you want to search it. For those of you who are on a phone call, my phone number is 620-562-0168. Once again, 620-562-0168. And that is a cell phone that you can text to as well. Sometimes it's easier to get me by text than it is by voice. An email is andrewh@farmstrategy.net. Once again, andrewh@farmstrategy.net. And we'll have Mark Lubers do the same thing at the end of his, and if Andrew Blueball wants to jump on and give contact information, we can do that as well. But anyway, with that, I'm going to finish my portion of what we're doing, just a quick update from us. But Mark has some really good stuff here on production, unless there's any questions. All right, Mark. Can you see your Mark?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Okay. So last week, well, I guess let me start back. From our previous call, we talked about, there were some questions about production, and we had mentioned a few things. And so I worked with Andrew on just, putting together just kind of an overview of just some highlight items to consider when it comes to spring wheat management. And I don't have a full farm management recipe here. It's just some high level items to keep in mind as we move into this season. A year from now, we're going to know a lot more of how to manage our spring wheat acres in this area. So so I sat down. I've had multiple conversations with my counterparts to the north. I've spent a number of hours just looking online, reading different articles on spring wheat management, and just trying to better myself in terms of understanding really what's the best approach going into this season. And so, I think first and foremost, probably the most important thing, regardless of what crop you're talking about, is planting date. And, for spring wheat in this area specifically, I think this is going to be extremely important, primarily from the standpoint of getting into the summer months and trying to avoid as much heat as we possibly can. And so I was trying to figure out, I think generally speaking, the planting date similar to spring oat planting is probably fairly accurate. But what I did here on this map, so spent some time just looking through various Mesonet data, actually the previous 5 years, because most Mesonet weather stations had up to 5 years worth of 2-inch soil temperature data. So comb through that data, just trying to figure out, okay, really, that 34 degrees at 2 inches, that's kind of the magic number that I've been told and what I've read. So just searched through that data and found the previous 5 years what the range of dates were of when 34 degrees at 2 inches was sustained. So meaning that, so for example, let's take this far eastern Kansas block, this February 16th to March 10th. So essentially what that means is, in one of those 5 years, February 16th was the date that 34 degrees was sustained. So the temp never dropped below 34 degrees on that after that date. The latest date would have been, in this case, March 10th, with the 5-year average being February 25th. And so what I found is, based on the spring oak planting recommendations, on average, we're about a week to 10 days earlier than most spring oak recommendations. So, which to me is a little bit encouraging, because the sooner we can get it in the ground, the better opportunity we have. If we can save a week to 10 days on the front side, then maybe that'll gain us a week to 10 days on the back side. So that's what each of these blocks represent. So I didn't go through all the weather stations. I just picked the ones that represent the general areas where I know you guys will be having production acres, and where we'll be having our strip trials. And so as of today, so I placed the last strip trial order this morning, actually, and we're up to 12 across this specific region of Kansas, Colorado, and Nebraska. So in addition to our production acres that we'll have this year, we'll have a really good look at different varieties across those different environments to really hone in which ones perform the best. But anyways, so that's just a summary of what I have here on this map in terms of planting date. So this addresses, kind of the optimum window. Andrew Holscher had mentioned something about a question being asked about, what's the latest planting date? With the wet conditions we've had so far this winter, and it looks like we're going to get more this weekend. What would be the last planting date? And so, assuming that this window, or the average specifically, would be the optimum planting date. Most of what I've read and the conversations I've had with my counterparts to the north, typically 3 to 4 weeks after that optimum planting date would be the last planting date. So again, using that eastern Kansas example, based on that recommendation, we'd be looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of March 20th, roughly, as the last planting date that we would want to consider. So again, we'll know a lot more this time next year, but going into it this year, that's the information that I have available. Any questions on planting date? And one thing to keep in mind, so this mesonet data, just for full transparency, these weather stations, sometimes they're placed in tilled ground, sometimes they're placed in sod or CRP, or have some sort of turf. So it's not as exact as what I would probably like, but at least it's at least a start. And so, like I mentioned, we'll know a lot more of this time next year. Okay, moving on. So seeding rate, I think this is pretty much the general consensus for across the board for spring wheat. Typically, you want to target 1.3 to 1.5 million seeds per acre. The idea is You start dipping below 1.2 million live seeds or 1.2 million plants, and all the studies that I've looked at show that your performance starts to drop off. You get over that 1.5 million seeding rate, and it pretty much plateaus across the board. So that one's pretty straightforward. I would treat it similar to how you would treat your winter wheat. If you can get in earlier on your planting window, you can start at the lower seeding rate, and as we progress into the later dates, need to bump your population up. Seeding depth. So again, this is pretty straightforward, pretty much general consensus. 1.5 to 2 inch seeding depth is optimum. Really the main concern is, I know there's some guys that do plant their winter wheat, an inch deep or so. The concern here is that if you do plant it too shallow, there is a potential if for whatever reason the conditions do turn off cold, then you do have the potential for damaging the crown, and that's really the main thing to keep in mind. And so most of the articles I read, most of the counterparts I've talked with said 28 degrees Fahrenheit, still fine. Some cases reports of below 22. The crown can tolerate that, but really you want to make sure you get it in the ground deep enough just to mitigate any cold swings that we might have after you plant. Fertility, for those growers that do high management, intensive management wheat production, really it's not a lot different. A good starter fertilizer with a phosphorus source is important, just to promote that early season growth and to really promote that tiller development. The nitrogen, sulfur, I've got an example here. For nitrogen, you want to target that 2.2 to 2.4 pounds per bushel. For sulfur, really it comes down to an 8-to-1 nitrogen to sulfur ratio is ideal. Not that sulfur necessarily translates to yield increase. It does have a little bit of impact on yield, but really it boils down to assisting in protein stability, making sure that, so adding total protein plus protein stability, which is going to be part of that quality component that the end users are going to be looking at. So example, just 60 bushel wheat at 2.4 pounds is going to be roughly 144 pounds of nitrogen, 18 pounds of sulfur. I didn't go into the details on micros. So there's, really when it comes to any fertility program, soil analysis is the first step in making that determination of what nutrients you need. These are just the big ticket items: nitrogen, sulfur, phos. Zinc is important for not only yield but also for protein development as well. So fungicide, considering we're going to be going into a little bit cooler temperatures, seed treatment is going to be critical in making sure that we offset any of those early season seedling diseases. An early season fungicide, foliar fungicide spray, really it's just a scout and spray methodology. It sounds like a fair number of growers in the northern states go ahead and put a partial rate of a fungicide down with their herbicide. Just make sure that if you do decide to do that, make sure that you refer to product labels, because there is a potential for some incompatibility issues. So just keep that in mind, depending on what herbicide you're using. Flag leaf stage. So same with winter wheat. Protecting the flag leaf is key. I did have a question about. Actually, I've had it asked a number of times about if I'm gonna be treating, so if I'm following corn and I'm gonna be treating for head scab or fusarium head blight anyways, can I skip my flag leaf application knowing that in 10 to 14 days I'm going to be spraying for FHB? So the probably the best answer would be is make sure you're scouting your fields, make sure you understand. Really, stripe rust is the thing that we're going to be looking at for a flag leaf application. So if we have a situation like we did this year, where there just wasn't any stripe rust around at flag leaf emergence, then I would say, yeah, you're probably okay to go ahead and skip your flag leaf fungicide application, knowing that whatever head scab fungicide you're going to be applying is also going to provide protection to that flag leaf. So that's just what I've put together. Pretty short, pretty simple. Does anybody have any other questions regarding what we've gone through or anything else that we haven't covered here? I know this isn't, like I mentioned, really a comprehensive guide to managing your total wheat acres, but at least just kind of some key points of what to keep in mind.
So I don't have any questions in the chat group. And if nobody else has any questions, I would encourage Mark, could you give your email address and phone number or a better way to contact people if they need to contact you direct?
Yeah, so my cell phone is 316-640-7895. That's 316-640-7895. Or you can email me at mark, M-A-R-K, .lubers, L-U-B-B-E-R-S, at Bayer, B-A-Y-E-R.com. Okay, so it looks like there is a chat for on nitrogen. So really that boils down to protein assimilation. So the rate being that high, it just comes down to having enough nitrogen to maintain a protein level over 14%. So from a recommendation, that's actually based on recommendations from South Dakota State, North Dakota State, and the University of Minnesota.
So for those on the audio recording without the chat, the question was, why is it 2.2 to 2.4 pounds of nitrogen? That seems pretty high. And then whose recommendation was that based off of? I would encourage you guys on this, think through your operation, maybe get in contact with Mark individually. Feel free to contact myself if you want to discuss those. The other thing I would encourage you guys to do is, if we're those who are out there trying, be willing to try a trial on your own operation, right? So try, I don't know, an extra high nitrogen pass right in the middle of your typical pass that you're wanting to do on your acres, and segregate that different. And when we pick up the samples and do the testing and stuff, we'll actually be able to sit here and determine a financial difference between what you tried on a trial basis in a strip and what you did across the rest of your field. So any of that type of stuff, once again, we want to value innovation. We want to value learning. I will tell you that there are some direct end user, straight to retail customers who are aware of this program that we'll be working with. And those type of things will help tell the story moving it forward. So I would encourage you to do a trial, make sure you flag it. Nothing's worse than doing a trial, not getting out of the piece of equipment and putting a flag in place and trying to come back and guess, where you actually put that trial. That doesn't help much on data. But anyway, so be willing to experiment, be willing to innovate, and be in touch with Mark, be in touch with myself. And are there any other questions?
Hey, Andrew. So going back to the nitrogen deal. So I do agree. I mean, that does, I was kind of taken aback by, the amount of nitrogen required. But, as I spoke with the TPMs in the spring wheat growing areas, and the more articles that I read on nitrogen management, that pretty much became commonplace, that 2.2 to 2.4. And really the idea is, based on environment, we could get, what you want to avoid is the effect of protein dilution. So if you don't have enough nitrogen available and we have higher yielding conditions, then the amount of protein to carbohydrate is going to be diluted, and really and Andrew, like you mentioned, I mean, we'll know more next year, but the end users, really that baseline for protein content in spring wheat is 14%. That's the magic number across the board. And so really to ensure that you're maintaining that amount of protein, that's the amount of nitrogen that's required to hit that. So thanks for the question.
Yeah, so just more discussion on this is, just asking, so if that's 100% up front rather than variable rated into the crop, there's implications of that. I think each program is going to be different. As a general rule, if you're producing a hard red winter wheat and you're having trouble creating protein in it, then make the assumption that you're going to have to put more into your spring wheat if you want it to perform based upon the bushels that you think you're going to be producing out there. If you're out here and you're actually producing a really high quality HRW and you're finding yourself consistently being able to hit protein, then you might have something there that you understand your practices better. So, each farm's going to be a little bit different. I would encourage you to talk with Mark, talk with myself, bring in some of the K-State guys if you want to, or the University of Nebraska has some publications. I'm sure Mark and I would be happy to forward on any publication to you that we could find. So anyway, let's engage on that. Please ask as many questions as you can about this, whether it be the market, the insurance piece, the FSA reporting, the production practices. Let's stay in touch, and we will get those questions around, develop it more, and probably have another one of these real close to planting time, if not before. So if there's nothing else, thank you guys. And we will have this posted here shortly, and I will send you a link.